Hi everybody, and welcome to our next installment for personal finance. We're going to go over the worksheet I gave you last week. I apologize for not having this up last week. I had some technical difficulties trying to figure out how to make this thing work. And it just dawned on me that I could just easily record myself typing in numbers instead of writing them in. Writing with a mouse was proving to be extraordinarily difficult to get anything that looked like real numbers. So let's get started though. So after each scenario, I will put a symbol up so you can, if you want, fast forward through the video and kind of find where each scenario is. My suggestion is after this first scenario, you'll get a feel for how to do it. Pause the video, try the second one on your own, and then check your answers with it. And do that for each scenario as you go through. And that way you can kind of get a practice for what types of insurance coverage there are and how those insurance coverages help you in the event of an accident. So that's the whole point of this, right, is to kind of get you familiar with these main types of coverage and what they do for you in case you are in an accident. So let's get started. All right, so Lindsay gets into an accident and she causes the accident with Ben. They both have minimum liability insurance. Remember, that means that you can have $25,000 of coverage for someone else's insurance when you're at fault for their medical bills, up to $50,000, $25,000 per person, up to $50,000. So that can be 12 people with $2,000 each for $24,000, or it could be 2 people, $25,000 each, but it has a max of 50 grand. You can't go over that no matter how many people get hurt. Anything over that, then you have to pay the difference. Your insurance company won't pay for it. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing we want to do is notice that Lindsay is at fault. So here I'm going to type an L for Lindsay, and then person not at fault was B for Ben. So that means that Ben's not going to pay for this accident, okay? At least his insurance won't. So the person at fault is Lindsay. So let's start going through what is covered and what is not. So let's get Ben's $900. This is a medical bill. Lindsay has minimum liability, which means she has $25,000 in coverage for medical bills for the other person, up to $50,000 across everyone who gets injured. So only Bill is injured. So that $900, that's paid by Lindsay's insurance. So I'm going to put it, notice how I put the $900 in Lindsay's column. So these are all what Lindsay's insurance and what her out-of-pocket is. The policy that does that is the bodily injury liability. That's this first part. And then property damage liability. These are the two minimum ones you have to buy by law to be insured in Washington State. Okay. The car was also totaled, and remember, property damage liability is a minimum of $10,000 of coverage. She has that, so the full $8,600 is going to be covered of Ben's car crash, is going to be covered by Lindsay's insurance, and this is going to be property damage liability, PDL coverage. So that leaves Lindsay's out of pocket for that part of the accident as 0 and 0. Okay? Now, Ben paid by insurance. His insurance isn't going to pay anything because he wasn't at fault in this case. And then his out-of-pocket is also 0. So right now Ben has had to pay nothing. So that's good for Ben, right? Now Lindsay, because she has liability coverage and she was at fault, her insurance won't help pay for any of her stuff at all. So paid by insurance is 0 and 0 for her costs. She's just out that money. Her out-of-pocket then is $1,500 and $1,400. If we look at this, this ends up being that she's going to have to pay $2,900 of out-of-pocket expenses, and her insurance is going to pay, what is that, $9,500 for her. Okay. Now Ben, he doesn't have to pay because he wasn't at fault. He's not going to pay for any of Lindsay's injuries or property damage or loss of wages. So on this accident, he is $0 out of pocket. He was just went through the trouble of having his car, messed up and his body being injured. So far, so good. So Lindsay got hit pretty hard with this, $200. The types of coverage that could help her. So if she had gone above and beyond the minimum and said, hey, I want to have this coverage here, collision coverage, that covers your car in case you were at fault in the accident, that coverage would kick in and repair your car for you. So it costs extra every month to have it, but it protects you against this that Lindsay got into. Actually, sorry, that wasn't the car. She didn't have any car damage. Well, it wasn't listed at least. What she's looking for here, is personal injury protection, PIP. This covers your medical bills when you're at fault. Remember, the bodily injury only covers the other person's stuff. So that would have covered this one for Lindsay. Her insurance would have done it. Again, this would cost more each month to have this coverage, but it helps you in case you get into an accident, helps pay for your medical bills. PIP would also actually pay for lost wages in most cases. So she may have had all this $200 back altogether and not been at fault. Now, one thing we haven't mentioned here is that there's this thing called deductible that we've talked about. A deductible is the amount that you pay when there's an insurance claim on your insurance. So whatever Lindsay chose her deductible to be, the first thing she would do in this case is she would pay your insurance company that deductible, and then the insurance company would then kick in these amounts to Ben. These would go straight to Ben. And then if she had those personal injury protection insurance, they would also write her a check for $2,900. Okay, so that's that one. Good. Number 2. All right, so Cyrus has minimum liability coverage. Again, just bodily injury, $25,000 per person up to $50,000. And Nika has minimum liability with collision coverage up to $15,000. So she's got that additional that's going to help her out maybe. All right, so both cars were totaled in the accident. Cyrus's car was valued at $5,400, Nika's at $22,000. You can see why Nika has that collision coverage, because this is more than Cyrus's $10,000 on his policy would help her pay for. He would run out $10,000 and she'd have to sue him trying to get the other money from him. And that's problematic to get money out of people when you sue them, especially if they don't have a lot of money. And Cyrus was slightly injured and had medical bills of $500. So who was at fault? Lost control of his car while texting. So that sounds like Cyrus is at fault. So let's put Cyrus in this column. Cyrus is going to be the one taking the brunt of this one. And then Nika in this column. My advice is don't text while you drive. So because Cyrus has minimum liability coverage only, his insurance is not going to pay for any of his damages. So it's going to be a 0 here and a 0 here. He's going to walk away from this accident having lost $5,000 there and $500. Now, had he gotten collision and PIP insurance, PIP coverage, he would have been able to cover these two things with his insurance. Okay. Now, paid by insurance. So Cyrus's insurance for minimum liability is only $10,000 for covering property that someone else, other person's damaged property. That leaves $12,000 that he's going to owe Nika in the end. Chances are, though, if he's got minimum insurance, he's not going to be able to afford to give Nika a check for $12,000. This is why Nika helped herself out. She said, okay, she's not going to pay any of Cyrus's bills, right? She was not at fault, so those two are gone for her. There's no out-of-pocket there either. And then when you get down here, she got $10,000 from Cyrus's insurance company, but needs another $12,000 to make her car whole. Well, luckily she has $15,000 of collision coverage. So her car insurance company, her policy, is going to give her that $12,000 after they recover the $10,000 from Cyrus. So that's going to actually reduce Cyrus's out-of-pocket from $12,000 back to 0. Because her insurance is going to pay for it, and it's going to be paid for by her collision coverage. That's the deal of collision coverage, 0. Now, if she didn't have collision coverage, she would likely have to pay this $12,000 to replace her car on her own, and then try and sue Cyrus in the court and try and get money from him. But again, that might be really difficult. So in this case, Nika's pay has no out-of-pocket expenses. She has $12,000 from her insurance company. Cyrus is left with $5,900 in out-of-pocket, and his insurance is going to pay Nika $10,000 to make her whole. So far, so good. So collision coverage is all about covering you. Remember, liability is all about covering the other person. Collision's all about you. All right. Your car, I should say. Now let's assume the other way. So let's say, hey, exact same situation, but Nika is at fault. She was the one texting. She crashed into Cyrus. Let's see what happens. So now Cyrus has $5,400. Now Nika has minimum liability insurance plus collision. So this is going to really help Cyrus out because now Nika is at fault. Her insurance company is going to pay the full $5,400 because it's less than $25,000 per person. That's going to come from her bodily injury liability insurance. So Cyrus is out of pocket, Nika's out of pocket is $0 for this. Cyrus's insurance won't be paying any money for this, for his bills, and he will have no out of pocket. He's good. He is covered completely. Now, Nika was at fault here. And this $500 in medical bills is going to not be covered. So she has no PIP, which is what protects you in case you cause an accident. So her out-of-pocket is $500 for this. Cyrus wasn't at fault, so he's not held accountable for her injuries. Now, Nika's car. So Nika was at fault, so there's no liability insurance that kicks in here. Okay? But she does have collision coverage, but she has a max of $10,000 or $15,000 in collision coverage. So her insurance company is going to write her a check for $15,000, and that comes from her collision coverage. But there's still $7,000 that wasn't paid for the car. That is going to have to come out of pocket for Nika. And again, Nika is going to have to pay her deductible here because her insurance company was used. And because Cyrus was not at fault, he has $0. So you can see what a big deal it is to be considered at fault or not at fault for an accident. Stay off those cell phones. The first thing an insurance company will do when there's an accident is they're going to get the texting and cellular data record for your phone to see if you were using it while there. They can see if you're streaming data, if you're making texts, if you're playing a video game. They can see all that stuff from those records. So stay off that phone. And then this one is her insurance is going to cover $20,400 of the accident. All right, you can just see the difference between these. Nika went from having no out of pocket to having $7,500 out of pocket just because of what was reversed, and Cyrus went from losing $6,000 to being even after it. So here's this kind of an opinion thing. You might say, hey, it seems fair because that person caused the accident. You might say there'd be times when it doesn't seem fair because maybe they're both kind of at fault and it's kind of hard to tell. So whatever you put there is fine. So Nika's car was only worth $22,000, but let's say she had just taken out a car loan. She still owed $25,000 on the car that was worth less. So now she's stuck owing $3,000 in loan and not having that car anymore, which is a real nuisance. Because even if she uses that $22,000 to buy a new car, she still has $3,000 in auto loans left. So what she could have done and gotten what's called gap coverage. It is this one here. And what gap coverage does, it specifically solves this problem. For the first year or two you own a car, if you get gap coverage and you total that car, instead of paying you what the car is worth, which will probably be less than the loan, the insurance company pays off the entire loan you have left. Whatever's greater, either the value of the car or the loan, whichever one's the bigger number, they pay that off. That's gap coverage. You only need that for a few years, and then it'll fall off your policy. Usually it falls off automatically. Okay. Scenario 3, let's do it. So Logan, in this case, right, just bought a new car and his insurance limits are the following. So he has bodily injury liability. Notice it's usually minimum $25,000, but you can choose a higher liability. It's going to cost you a little more each month, but you'll be more protected in case of an accident. Max up. Oh, and you know what? This really should be 120,000, not 4 people. It is maxed out by the value amount, not the number of people injured. That's a horrible mistake on my part. So bodily injury is $30,000 per person, max of 120. So if you get in an accident with a busload of kids and every kid on there had $2,000 of injury and there were 60 kids, your insurance company would still cover it because it would be $120,000 at that point. So you wouldn't have to have a worry there. So it's $30,000 per person max, and then a max of $120,000 across everyone who was injured. And then he also has, let me put a comma back there because we do need a comma, property damage liability. So this protects, again, if he causes an accident, it pays for the other person's stuff, and he's upped that limit to $50,000. So that if he gets into an accident with a more expensive car, his insurance company will cover more of that cost. And then he has collision insurance, which is going to, again, cover him, not the other person. And he has PIP, which will cover his medical bills up to $40,000. And he has what's called underinsured motorist coverage of $25,000. So if the other person doesn't have enough insurance or doesn't have insurance, his insurance company will pay up to $25,000 extra on top of everything else to make up for the missing insurance from the other person. All right. Now, Addie was in this accident as well, and she has minimum liability coverage. Oh, it looks like Logan fell asleep at the car and crashed into Addie's car. So let's put Logan here as at fault for the accident. So his insurance is going to kick in first. So, at fault. Logan has bodily, let's see, which one is all this stuff? Addie's car. So this is Addie's car. And then medical bills are $29,000. So it goes car, medical. So let's go through this. Logan's insurance. He has a liability, body injury liability covering the other person for up to $30,000 per person. So all of this gets paid by Logan's insurance, $23,000, and that's paid by his bodily injury liability. His out of pocket for that is just going to be his deductible. Right? Maybe I can just put that. Addie's policy won't pay for her medical bills because they're fully covered, and her out-of-pocket is $0. Now, Addie's, paid by Addie's insurance, or sorry, this is Logan's insurance again, right? Addie had $29,000 of coverage, or of damage to her vehicle. Luckily, Logan had $50,000 in property damage liability. He increased that from the standard $10,000 to $50,000. Again, cost him more every month, but he felt like it was worth it. In this case, it's going to pay off because his insurance company is going to kick in the full amount for that damage to the vehicle, which means if not, he would have had $10,000 here and $19,000 he still owed. So his out-of-pocket is $0. And Addie is not going to pay for any of that. It's going to come straight from Logan's insurance. Now, Logan's stuff. So he has more than liability insurance, so we can kind of take a look at this. This, again, is going to be medical bills first. He has PIP, which is what covers his personal injury protection, his injuries up to $40,000. So Logan's actually going to, this is going to be paid for by Logan's PIP policy, and his out-of-pocket is $0. Again, it's just the deductible, but he's already paid it up here. And then Addie, because she's not at fault, she does not pay for his medical bills at all. She won't pay for his vehicle at all, so that's going to be $0. She's going to walk away from this thing, not own anything, which is kind of cool. Now the out-of-pocket here. So this is a damage to Logan's vehicle, which could be covered if he has collision insurance. And we look up here and he says, well, collision insurance of $30,000. Now he must have a pretty nice car to have collision insurance of $30,000. You would never want more collision insurance than what your car is worth. So because his insurance policy is more than his vehicle's damage, it's going to get paid off completely. And that's going to be by his collision coverage and $0 out of pocket. So at the end of the day, Logan is $0 out of pocket. His insurance is at $52, $67, $83 maybe. his insurance company just picked up $83,000 for this very significant, serious accident that happened. So far, so good. All right, let's just flip this thing around. And let's say maybe it was Addie who fell apart and fell asleep, and Logan did not. He got crashed into. Now let's go back and take a look at this. We're going to start down here with Logan's stuff because we know Addie's insurance covers Logan's stuff because she has minimum liability. Now, here's the rub on this. That liability coverage here, that Logan's car was damaged by $15,000, her policy only kicks in $10,000 because she has minimum coverage, and that's her property damage liability. And so the out-of-pocket still for Addie, she still owes $5,000. And if she doesn't get lucky and Logan's policy cover that, she's going to be on the hook for that money. Now, Logan's $16,000 medical bills, that's going to be covered completely by Addie's insurance because Addie has bodily injury insurance up to $25,000 per person, max of $50,000. So that $16,000 is paid for by Addie's insurance, and that's her bodily injury liability insurance. And so Addie's out of pocket to pay for this part of it is $0. Now, Addie's bills, nobody's going to help her with these bills. Her insurance company does not help her because she only has liability insurance. That means she's going to fill the full $23,000 of out-of-pocket expenses and $29,000 of damage to the vehicle. Wait, I had that backwards. $23,000 damage to the vehicle, $29,000 of medical bills. All right. So, where are we at now? So now we got to go over here and talk about what Logan. Now, Logan's stuff down here, he's not at fault, so he's not going to pay for any of Addie's stuff. So these two can just go as $0. He's not doing that. Now, here's the problem. Addie owes him $5,000 for the remaining damage. He got a check for $10,000 from the insurance company. The likelihood of him suing Addie and getting that money back right away, it's going to be a long process. If he gets anything at all, it's going to be a rough, long process with lawyer fees and all that stuff happening. So, luckily though, that in this $15,000 is... Oh, I had this backwards. Oh man, I apologize. This was his medical coverage, so this should have been BIL. And this one should be property damage liability. And this is actually going to be paid. This one's going to be paid fully. And it's going to go to $0. So if you've been yelling at your computer, Mr. Hauser, you're an idiot. You did that wrong this whole time. You are vindicated. I did. So this is the car damage, and this is his medical bills damage. That goes to $0. Addie's policy pays for that one, but only pays $10,000 on the car, $6,000 left over. Okay. So again, his medical insurance was paid fully, so that's all $0 there. Here's where the rub comes in. He's going to have to pick up that $6,000 or sue Addie. So the nice thing, though, is he has underinsured motorist coverage of $25,000. This is where this comes in. So Addie's insurance fell short of paying for his damages. So by paying a little extra each month, he has this coverage, which means his insurance company is now going to kick in that $6,000, which means Addie will not have to pay for that. She's off the hook. She lucked out he had that policy. Now, you might be saying, Mr. Oz, I don't want that policy because then it just helps the other person. Well, not really. You got to think, if Logan doesn't have this policy, he's got to come up with this $6,000 to buy a new car, or he's just out of luck. Right? And his only hope is to sue Addie, who may not even have much money to sue, right? If someone doesn't make any money, you can't take money they don't have from them. So his insurance is going to kick in $6,000. His out-of-pocket is now going to be $0. Okay? Otherwise, you can even think of his out-of-pocket as $6,000 because maybe the other person couldn't pay for it. And Addie is left with $52,000. in bills that she's got to come up with for the damaged vehicles. This is why if you have an expensive vehicle, you need to have some kind of collision coverage to help cover in case you're determined to be at fault. And the insurance company is going to pay $31,000. All right. Sounds good. So why is it good to have collision coverage when you're at fault in the accident? Because collision coverage, that's the only way you get your stuff paid off is to have collision coverage and PIP coverage if you're at fault. Otherwise, you have paid it out of your own pocket. All right, so this is number 4, our last one. This is taking forever. I apologize. All right, let's do it. So Jaden just purchased a Tesla Model X. Good job, Jaden. That's like a $100,000 car. So, yay, I'm glad to see Jaden's doing well. He upgraded his insurance to include $75,000 of collision insurance, right? So that protects his Tesla in case someone hits him. And you really need that when you have such an expensive car. $50,000 of PIP, and that's the personal injury protection, which protects you, not the other person, in case there's an accident. $30,000 of property damage liability. Again, that's protecting the things that you damage if you're at fault. So this could be another car, but it could also be like if you swerve off the road and hit a telephone pole or a street sign or a fire hydrant, all those things, you crash into someone's house, into a business, all those things are covered by your property damage liability. And $25,000 of bodily injury liability per person for, and again, this was a mistake on my part. It shouldn't be the number of people that max out. It's the total amount that maxes out. Let's call it $75,000 total. Now, this is in excess of the limit of the minimum requirements, so they'd pay a little bit extra to have this higher maximum limit. Okay. Audrey, who has no insurance. Audrey's driving with no insurance. That is not cool. Eating a quick breakfast with no insurance, and she's doing something reckless while driving. Crashes into Jane's car. Both cars were totaled. I feel so bad for both of them. The value of Jaden's car was $93,000, and Audrey's was $12,000. Jaden had $32,000 in medical bills for himself, $27,000 for his passenger. So there was 2 people in the car with Jaden. Both got injured, while Audrey's medical bills were $8,000. Great. So person at fault here is Audrey, and Jaden is not at fault. So let's start on the person at fault side, and let's see. Audrey has no insurance, so $0 is paid by her insurance. There's no policy for it. Out of pocket, she literally owes Jaden $93,000. What do you think the chances is that somebody's going to be able to write you a check for $93,000, especially if they have no car insurance? It seems pretty small. And same thing here. There's no insurance help. So she owes him another $32,000 for his medical bills, and no insurance help. She owes another $27,000 for those medical bills. Now she has no insurance again. No, she's not getting any help for anything. It is all falling down on her head. So right now, for this accident, because of this Tesla she hit, she got unlucky and crashed into a Tesla. She's looking at there's $125,000, $50,000, $62,000, $74,000, maybe $182,000 of write me a check for $182,000, right? If she can't write a check for $182,000 right now, she's going to lose her license and get tons of fines. She's already going to get tickets and fines for driving without insurance, and on top of that, they're going to take her license away and be illegal to drive. Now, there is some good news that Jaden was responsible and had some extra insurance, that more than the minimum. So let's look at what Jaden's policy will kick in now. Otherwise, if Jaden sues her for $180,000, he might get $4,000, and the other is just he's out that money. So let's take a look. Paid by his insurance. He has collision insurance, which protects his property. So here, $75,000 covered by his insurance, and that's the collision coverage. So left over, that reduces this for Audrey, actually, which helps her out some by a tune of, what's that, $8,000. So she has $8,000 she still owes Jaden. Okay. Now at this point, Jaden's out of pocket for this is the deductible. So he's going to have to pay his deductible to use his insurance like this. Now, Jaden, his injuries, so this is where his PIP kicks in. So $50,000 in PIP. So that's going to cover his injuries of $32,000. And he still has $18,000 left over. So that's of PIP covers for a total of $50,000. So $18,000. $18,000 there, and that's going to be PIP insurance, and so that's going to reduce this actually for Audrey back down to zero because Jaden's insurance is going to cover that. It's going to increase. It's going to decrease this one down to $9,000, and it's going to be a zero out of Jaden's and a zero out of Jaden. Although there's going to be $9,000 of uncovered medical bills. After all the insurance kicks through. So someone's going to have to pay for that, either Audrey or Jaden. Legally, Audrey has to, but if she has no money, Jaden will have to, because they're in his name or his passenger's names, to cover those. Again, if Audrey was at fault, Jaden pays absolutely nothing to help Audrey out. There is nothing going on there. So in the end, Audrey's going to be out $37,000. So this is that number at the end where if she can't pay this, she's going to lose her license. And paid by insurance is going to be $107,000, $1,525, I think it's something like $125,000 for Jaden. My math may not be perfect there. 25.7. Yeah, it is. Okay. So moral of the story is as you get cars that are nicer and nicer over time, you need to have collision coverage. You wouldn't get collision coverage if you have kind of a junker that's like $500 car, because when you crash, your deductible is going to probably be more than that anyway. You need to have PIP insurance, so personal injury protection. That way, if you cause an accident or you veer off the road or you fall asleep, you'll have your medical bills covered. You will have medical bills. Likely, and they get expensive fast. So PIP coverage is a great thing to have. The question of how much is a question for you to figure out based on how much you can afford, but get some. You can also increase your liability insurance for bodily injury of other people and your property damage insurance of other people. And again, how much you increase that by is how much you're willing to pay for it, and how much you can afford to pay for it. So what could Jaden have done to save himself from having to try and collect this extra $9,000? He could have bought underinsured motorist protection and uninsured motorist protection. So if it gets those, and both of those are usually pretty inexpensive because the chance of that accident happening is pretty unusual. So he could have gotten those two, and that would have paid that $9,000 that Audrey still owed out of pocket for this one. It would have taken care of that one because that's the liability insurance. And it would have taken care of this one as well. It would have taken care of everything beyond what Audrey wasn't able to pay. All right. That was this whole thing. I hope that was helpful. I apologize for not having this ready to go earlier, but we're all just trying to make through and do everything. Have a great rest of your week. I'm out.